This is the guided practice for 2.4, and we're dealing with percents greater than 100 and percents less than 1%, and we're writing these as fractions and decimals and vice versa. Okay, so let's read carefully what we need to do here. We have 325%, okay, so that's more than 100%. That's a lot more. So there's going to be some whole numbers there because it's more than 100%. Write each percent as a decimal and as a mixed number or fraction in simplest form. Okay? So here's where we're going from a percent to a decimal to a fraction. We have 325. We know that you put all your percents over 100. If it's a percent, over 100. Always, always, always. No matter if it's the smallest number or the biggest number, it's always the number over 100. Now, if I divide this out, 325 divided by 100, I know 100 goes into 325 3 whole times, and it leaves me with 25 100. Now, I need to simplify this because 25 and 100 can be simplified. I can divide it each by 25. Divided by 25, that gets me 1, that gets me 4. So the fraction, or mixed number, I should say, is 3 1/4. Now the decimal, I could start right here, move it over 2, 1, 2, and it's 3.25. 3.25. I could take this and type it into my calculator and go 325 divided by 100, and I'm going to get 3.25. So you either move your decimal over or you do the division once you get into a fraction. Okay? All right, let's do 480. 480%, because it's a percent, it's out of 100. So way more than 100%. It's 480%. That's huge. So I do it like this. How many hundreds are in 480? Well, there's 4 hundreds in there, so 4, and it leaves me with 80 over 100. Now I can simplify this to be 4 8/10, and then I can simplify that, cut that in half, cut that in half, then I get 4 4/5. 4 4/5. So there's my fraction, or my mixed number. This one I'm going to go right here. I'm going to go 1, 2. So my decimal is 4.80. But I actually don't need that 0. It's just 4.8. And if on my calculator I would do this one, 480 divided by 100, it's going to give me 4.8. Okay. All right. Those are when the percent is way over 100%. Let's go where the percent is less than 1%. It's so small, so small. Okay, so I'm going smaller, so I'm going to take my decimal and take it away. So if I have 0.6, I have to go over 1, 2. There's my decimal point. So my decimal is 0.00. Oops, that's a 0. 006. 006. Now, I also know I got to get this to a fraction. So, it's 0.6 over 100. All right. Now, I actually am glad I went to this decimal first. And that's really sloppy. Let me fix that. 0.006. This, when you have a fraction with a decimal, can be a little bit more confusing. So let's do this. I'm going to read this like it is. 0.6% is the same as it's the same as, if I just read this number, this is my thousandths place. It's 6 thousandths. So 6,000. Okay? Percents, you always put over 100. But when you have decimals and you're converting it to a fraction, you have to see what your place value is. And this last place value is thousandths, so it's 1,000. Now, I can simplify this. Divided by, let's just cut it in half. Divided by 2, that gets me 3/500ths. 3/500ths. Very small fraction. Okay? All right, let's go here. Now, instead of having a percent, we have some mixed numbers, and we want to write these. Well, we have mixed numbers and decimals. We want to write those as a percent. So let's get 1 4/5 as a percent. All right, the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to get it to a decimal. And the way I want to do that is I'm going to go 5. I can make it a mix. I could do this a couple different ways. I could take 5 times 1 is 5 plus 4, so it's 9/5. Then on my calculator, I go 9 divided by 5 equals 1.8. Okay. Then, now I have a decimal. I want to make it a percent. So I got to go over 2. 1, 2. And then I have my percent. But I need a number to fill in here. So it is 180%. Okay. So 180%. The other way I could have done that is I know that because I have a 1 right here, I know I have 100%, because 100% is 1 whole. Then I just need 4/5. 4/5. I could times that to get it to 100. Times 20 times 20. So that's 80 over 100, which equals 80%. So the 4/5 is 80%. The 1 is 100%. I put those together, I get 180%. Okay. Or I could have done the 1, and then I know I was going to have a decimal, and then on my calculator, I do this part, which is 4 divided by 8 equals, 4 divided by 5, not 8, equals 0.8. 0.8. So I get 1.8. Then I got to move it over to 1, 2 to get my percent. And it gives me 180%. Okay, bunch of different ways to do this. Hopefully you'll land on the one that makes sense to you and you feel good about. Okay, this one, let's take this to a percent. To go to a percent, I'm going to the right 2. So I start here, I go 1, 2, and there's my point, 0.15%. Okay, so it's a decimal in the percent, 0.15%. It's so small. Okay, the other way I could do this is an interesting way, but I could read this number. Place value, tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10 thousandths. So 10,000, and I have 15. 15 out of 10,000. It's like saying I had 10,000 questions on a test. I got 15 of them correct, which would be so not good. And then if I have my calculator, I do 15 divided by 10,000. It's going to give me this. Okay. So that gave me, I went from a fraction, from a decimal here, to a fraction. Okay. But I wanted to get to a percent. So didn't really need to go to this fraction. I just wanted you to see what it looked like. The best way to go to a percent is to start at the decimal point and go 2 over 1, 2. 0.15%. Okay. Now, this one I want to get to a percent. And I'm going to start at the decimal and go 2 over 1, 2, decimal, or I mean percent. So 2.75, 2% equals 275%. Okay. And that's kind of the best way to go from a decimal to a percent. 2.75 is 275%. All right, let's look here. A manufacturing company finds that 0.0019 of the light bulbs it makes are defective. Write this as a percent. That's a really small number. It's 19 ten-thousandths. So this company must be pretty good. Doesn't make very many faulty light bulbs. In fact, it's 19 out of 10,000. So for every 10,000 bulbs it makes, 19 are going to be defective or bad. So we want to write this as a percent. The way I do the percent is I start with my decimal and I go 2 to the right. 1, 2, that's where it ends up. So it's 0.19%. Okay? 0.19%. Really less than even 1%. It's very, very small. Okay, so hopefully you got a sense of how to take things from a decimal to a percent to a fraction to a decimal. We're kind of starting to do that where you go back and forth between all three of them. Okay? Go ahead and go on to the independent practice. And this is for 2.4. So the independent practice is page 121, 1 through 14. So you don't have to do 15 and 16, okay? So just 1 through 14 on the independent practice.